Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Go Iowa Awesome and Rivals.com. I'm your recruiting analyst and host, Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter, joined as always by publisher of the site, Adam Jacoby, and managing editor, Ross Binder, here on this, is it Thursday? It's Thursday evening in June. So we are stretching for content at this point in the year, i.e., only one podcast a week at this point in time. But we got some good Hawkeye stuff going on today. I want to start off with some kind of old news at this rate, but news nonetheless. Jackson Stratton, Iowa bringing in Colorado State transfer, former Washington commit. He's a quarterback as a preferred walk-on. So the Hawkeyes now go from having two scholarship quarterbacks on their roster in Cade McNamara and Marco Lainez to now having those two, Brendan Sullivan, James Reeser, and now Jackson Stratton as a pretty qualified preferred walk-on in that quarterback room. I wrote a couple different pieces. First, the introduction piece, and then I sat down and talked with Jackson about his decision and his commitment. You can check out both of those on iowa.rivals.com. And Adam, you've been in the process of moving and such, but based on what you've been able to take in about Jackson and learn about Jackson, what do you think about the move so far?
Yeah, this seems like a win-win for all parties involved. Iowa, obviously, all the depth that they can get at the QB position is a good thing. And the fact that they're not spending a scholarship on a player like this, and Jackson, for whatever reason, his options were a little bit limited in terms of where he was going to be able to go and contribute on a day one sort of situation. So this is an opportunity for him to play under Tim Lester, learn, grow, really make himself a more versatile QB. And it's a situation where there aren't expectations being placed on his shoulders, right? He gets to be the backup to the backup. He gets to, essentially fill the role of a walk-on quarterback, a very qualified walk-on quarterback, without being essentially Deacon Hill 2.0 and being one dodgy knee ligament away from, having to, be under center for a majority of the season. So a good situation. And, from Tim Lester's perspective, he's got to be looking at that QB room and thinking, all right, now we've got a full complement of guys to work with. So, yeah, really not a whole lot where you can even find something to criticize this move for. Ross, do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, he seems like he's, somewhat overqualified to be, a preferred walk-on, or at least a scout team quarterback here at Iowa. He was a three-star recruit coming out of high school. He's been at Colorado State for a couple years, so he has a little bit of college experience. There's just a little bit more to that resume than you often see from a walk-on quarterback. So, and I think that is a huge benefit for Iowa. The quarterback room was looking pretty thin just about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, and it's looking much more robust. A lot more bodies in there, and a lot more bodies that guys that know what they're doing, that have played quarterback for a while, that have been in college for a year or two, and may or may not have played a lot of in-game snaps, but they're at least familiar with the practice routines, the demands of being a college football player, and those sort of things. So you're getting a lot more ready to go guys. I mean, I'm not expecting Stratton obviously to see any meaningful minutes this season for Iowa unless he just has a dynamite summer or something. He's just takes to the Lester offense like a fish to water or something. And even then, it would probably still require some significant bad luck on the injury front for the other Iowa quarterbacks, which we certainly don't want to see. But just having a guy like that available at the scout team position and in the room, I think, is a real advantage for this team and this program.
So, couple things. I think we all more or less agree across the board that looking at the fact that he was a three-star, the fact that he was initially committed to Washington, and the fact that he was at Colorado State, he's been in college football for 2 years. Like those things across the board make you think, oh, he's probably overqualified. At the same time, what I've seen some folks lambast this move for some reason. Well, I get it, but at the same time, I think it's stupid, to tell you the truth, is the fact that he went 4 of 17 for a touchdown and 2 picks in his 4 games as a freshman at Colorado State. Like, yeah, I mean, yeah, again, this was 2 years ago, air raid offense. He's probably nervous as all hell as a freshman, even though it's garbage, and it was garbage time. And again, true freshman then. I mean, so what Jackson told me is the new coaching staff at Washington, though he had been committed, I think 8 months when the coaching flip made from whoever it was prior to Kalen DeBoer to Kalen DeBoer, and they didn't honor his scholarship. That was, I think, 2 weeks before signing day. Everybody had their quarterbacks in that class. Colorado State signed 2 quarterbacks in that class, and he had to pick everything up. And like, to make that decision as a then junior in high school and then have to flip, and he graduated early, so he made this decision like 2 weeks before move-in day, 3 weeks before move-in day. He went out there on a visit, and he was very thankful for Colorado and everything like that, and very grateful for his time. It just came down to him versus another guy, and the other guy beat him out, and he said they understood his decision to leave. And so to throw him into a situation where this is not what he was expecting, he had just graduated high school, like he thought he was a Power 5 quarterback, and then you throw him in at Colorado State, which nothing against Colorado State, but it's just a completely different situation. And he's got 3 years of college of eligibility left. He's in a room that's packed. You're not expecting him to come in and start. Like, this is a good situation for both him and the Iowa football program. And looking ahead to the 2025 class, the quality of preferred walk-on at quarterback went up exponentially just by hiring Tim Lester in the last however many months it's been. Exponentially. Ryan Fitzgerald, who they're bringing in the 25 class as a preferred walk-on, along with Jimmy Sullivan. He's got loads of G5 scholarship offers, FCS scholarship offers. Tommy Paholski didn't have a single Division I offer to his name. And, you know, we saw that when we did get to see him. We saw why. And with bringing in a guy like Tommy Paholski, I don't think any of us really expected anything, like even potential, to come in and play. You see maybe 1 or 2 reasons why maybe Jackson Stratton could be that. And he believes in himself. He thinks he can earn time at Iowa too. So believes in Tim Lester. So I'm not making the prediction that 2 years down the road, Jackson Stratton is Iowa's starting quarterback, but there are reasons to see some of that silver lining with him. I think you both had something to say here. I'll go right back to you, Russ.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention, you mentioned his underwhelming freshman statistics, and I would say, one, pretty small sample size, obviously, but also, here's a quarterback with some other also not exactly stellar freshman statistics. 9 of 27, 33%, 179 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. That quarterback, you might know him. He was CJ Beathard. So, he turned out decent after he had a little bit more time in college football. So I don't think we need to, throw somebody in the garbage because they had a couple bad snaps as a true freshman or anything. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, if this were a situation where Stratton was coming into a QB coach like Brian Ferentz, then yeah, at that point you can say the production isn't there, and you get to worry because Brian Ferentz's track record of developing quarterbacks was just never stellar, and that's putting it kindly. But Tim Lester does have that track record. And so it's again, just circling back to earlier, it's a situation where the expectations are not going to be put on this kid's shoulders. He gets to learn from somebody who knows a thing or two about the technical aspects of developing a quarterback, gets to learn some more schematic stuff that, again, he was not going to be able to learn in Iowa City over the last decade or so. So, yeah, this is just a win-win for everybody involved. And, of course, everybody wants him to be Joe Montana 2.0 as a freshman in Colorado State. But if the production were already there for him, 1, he's either not transferring, or 2, he's transferring to somewhere, like USC or Ohio State. So, and most certainly he's going to be getting a scholarship at that point. So this is exactly what an offensive coordinator like Tim Lester should be asking for, and the fact that he got it is great news for Iowa football.
The other thing I was going to say regarding, you mentioned Brian Ferentz, is this is another quarterback who is not a Brian Ferentz project, right? A guy that Brian Ferentz brought in, and that in itself is a step in the right direction, right? Like, and you have your practice team quarterback. You don't have to throw Reeser or Marco Linez into that spot. They can just learn. And you got your practice squad guy. And if he leapfrogs some dudes, then maybe you throw James Reeser into that practice squad spot. Who knows? We'll see when we approach it. But I just thought this was overall a win. You know, I wrote an article grading all of the transfer additions that Iowa made this offseason. Again, you can check that out at iowa.rivals.com. And I think I gave that one like a B minus or a C plus. And like I just and overall gave the class as a whole a B minus. And it was just a situation where he's a walk-on, like you don't expect much from him, but you know, relatively maybe could have been an A, like just given the fact that he has this previous 3-star ranking. I mean, he's 6'5", like was part of an air raid offense. There's a possibility there, right? Considering it's a walk-on, could be considered an A. I gave it like a C plus or a B minus, I think. So
yeah, I mean, you don't want to hand out A's for guys that we're not really projecting to ever start per
right.
se.
Right.
But this for a walk on, this is about as good as a QB prospect is going to get, especially for a team like Iowa.
Exactly. Now, speaking of good as Iowa's going to get, a couple Hall of Famers now in Iowa City, and Shonn Greene and Adrian Clayborn. They're part of the 2024 class for the Iowa Hawkeyes Athletics Iowa Hawkeyes Hall of Fame. There we go. Athletics Hall of Fame. Both inducted. Are they officially inducted, or is it just like part of the class, or how does that work? I don't know if you guys looked into that.
The induction ceremony is going to be later this summer, the day prior to the Illinois State game to open the season. So I don't know if they're in like limbo status, they're provisional Hall of Fame members or what, but their official ceremony is going to be in late August. But the announcement was made by the school that this is going to be the class and they're in it.
And there's nothing to this except for, of course, they're Hall of Famers, right? Like we all saw what they were able to do in the black and gold. Right around then was when I really started paying attention to Iowa football as a kid. I was 12 in 2008, and Shonn Greene was, though he was the first running back I really watched on a consistent basis, was still a shock to the system because of just how good he was. And you throw in Adrian Clayborn and his punt block against Penn State and return for touchdown. And these are core memories for me at the age of 12. And especially in my, it's one of those things that, you know, make you pursue this as a career, right? Like that's college football, and those are the players that make college football. And I mean, just how dominant Shonn Greene was that year too, 2008 when he won the Doak Walker Award, the Purdue game, the Wisconsin game, 2 games in one season where he went up above 200 yards. And then, of course, he goes to the Jets and absolutely wrecks the Chargers in a playoff game. But 2 incredible careers, 2 of the best to ever do it in Iowa City. Either you guys have any, I'll go to you, Ross, here. Any particular memories or moments or games that you look back on with these 2 guys?
Oh man, that's not a short list, to be honest, because they were stars of those 08, and then I mean for Clayborn it was even more than 08. He was, you know, 07 through 10. He was their full career. Shonn Greene, it was really just one beautiful supernova season. But that was the best season a running back has ever had at Iowa, which goes back decades, and it's he's on the short list, or maybe the top of the list, is the best running back of the Kirk Ferentz era, if you want to rate longevity versus single season brilliance, whatever. But he was incredible. He just destroyed, and he was a really fun running back if you just like running backs that are just violent and just destructive to defenders, because he had a full set of skills. He was fast too, which he showed on a few occasions, but he loved to punish defenders. I mean, one of my favorite moments from him was against Purdue. Poor Frank Duong, safety for the Boilermakers. He just got stiff armed into the turf, planted like 3 feet down. And I don't know how, if that had happened to me, like I'd get off the field, walk off, go to the locker room, go to the bus, and never come back. Like that's it. I'm out. This is not for me. Like Shonn Greene just like destroyed him in that moment. And that was amazing. The Wisconsin game that you mentioned, I'll go to you in just a second here, Adam. The Wisconsin game too. I mean, he had like over 200 yards, 4 touchdowns, just single-handedly just annihilated the Badgers that day. And that was incredible. But yeah, what were you going to add, Adam?
That was not the only time that Shonn embarrassed Frank during that game. There was also the spin move, the inside spin move. Like he spun the wrong direction for the way that the run was going, and I don't really know how to explain it other than that. But so Frank was basically diving at air, and Greene breaks it, turns it into like a 70-yard outrun everybody else touchdown. And you also mentioned the Wisconsin game and his 4 touchdowns against Wisconsin. I mean, obviously the big run is the closest that Kinnick Stadium's ever come to having a beast quake moment. I mean, just broken tackle after broken tackle after broken tackle. There is one other run out of those 4 that always stuck in my mind, and it was his first one. And yet it's a blink and you miss it sort of play, because on its face, it just looks like a regular, he's showcasing a little bit of his patience in the backfield, and his patience and vision and balance also made him a great running back. But you see a situation where one of the Badger linemen gets himself into the backfield, threatening to blow the thing up. And you see Greene use his off arm to help his blocker finish a pancake block. It opens up the hole. He dances in for a touchdown. And once you're looking for it, and once you see it, you're like, oh, this man's a genius. It's that sort of athletic improvisation that he was able to, one, use his toughness, like you mentioned, use those weird spin moves, use all sorts of tricks to get himself into the end zone, and which he did often. And yeah, I mean, I think he is pretty well alone. Maybe if you count Liddell Betts, who was a Hayden Fry recruit. But I think he's pretty well alone as the best running back of the Kirk Ferentz era, even if he only really did it for one season.
Yeah, and then I mean Adrian Clayborn, he was just a phenomenal defensive end. The Penn State play, which was ironically on special teams rather than pure defense, but I mean that one will live forever, where he destroys the poor little man sent to block him, and then blocks the punt, picks it up perfectly on the bounce, and runs it back for a touchdown to key that big Iowa upset win over Purdue in 2009. That will be on highlight reels as long as highlight reels exist for Iowa football. Like it's that kind of play. And that's probably the iconic play for Adrian Clayborn, but he was just such a consistent performer, week after week, game after game, season after season. He was the other performance I think that stands out to me for him was after the 2009 season, the Orange Bowl, when Iowa had Norm Parker created a perfect defensive game plan to shut down Georgia Tech's triple option attack. And Clayborn on the edge was a huge part of that. He was, he read the plays perfectly and was just consistently blowing up whatever Georgia Tech wanted to do or was trying to do on offense. And, he was just an excellent player in that edge position where, he could get to the quarterback. He could, stop the running back. He could do whatever you needed him to do there and just do it at such a consistent high level.
Yeah, I think when Iowa fans talk about that Orange Bowl and they say, well, Clayborn made it so that Georgia Tech couldn't run left. I think if you didn't watch that game, you probably hear that and think, oh, well, it just meant that it was better to run right. No, no, no. He took the left side of the field away. After halftime, Georgia Tech didn't even try because it was blown up block after blown up block, tackle for loss after tackle for loss. I mean, you could not run to his side. And so they just stopped trying. And their one touchdown drive, their one sustained touchdown drive, had no runs to the left whatsoever. It was either around right, around, or, behind the right guard, nothing to the left of the center, because he was that dominant. And what a perfect cherry on top of his career like that. And yeah, just richly deserving, and glad that he's getting immortalized, because he and Shonn Greene both deserved it. Absolutely.
All right, there you go. Now there was you mentioned a baseball player and a basketball player that were inducted as well, Adam. I didn't recognize either of those names. I think those are out of my wheelhouse. Kunnert?
Kevin Kunert. Wait. Now, okay. Ross, do you know how that's pronounced? Because I know somebody who has it with the long U, but I don't think they're related to Kevin. Do you know if it's Kunnert or Kunert?
I do not know. I'm sorry.
Why do they pay us to do what we do?
And part of it is just like I always just read it. Like he was. I am older than you substantially, but still before my time too. But Mike Boddicker, I certainly recognize, because he was one of the last Hawkeyes until very recently to turn into a starting pitcher at the major league level. He was great for the Orioles in particular. I think I saw that he had like 26 complete games in one season back when they let pitchers do that. So he was a real like factor in Major League Baseball for years and years. And I'm a little bit surprised that he hadn't been inducted until now. Like, maybe his college career wasn't as good, but I mean, everyone knew who Mike Boddicker was. I mean, he wasn't Greg Maddux, but he was a real pride and joy for Hawkeye baseball for a long, long time.
A future potential pride and joy for Iowa football, Yose Epenesa taking his visit to Iowa 7th through the 9th this weekend. He's the first official visitor of this cycle. This is his third official visit of 5 that are scheduled. He's already visited Penn State, Missouri. It's Iowa this weekend, then Utah, and then Miami. We have an article previewing all of that, plus some intel from a few sources regarding his recruitment with Iowa, some conversations that he's had with a few other sites. Just an overall view of how he'd fit at Iowa as well. Really just pretty much top to bottom intel that we have on Yose and his visit, his upcoming visit. Obviously, we don't want to reveal too much, but I guess, is there anything that you guys would have a question about, or would you think would be pertinent here that maybe I can answer regarding Yose and his visit this weekend?
Well, I do know that Miami has been going hard on NIL money, and using that as really their top pitch for recruiting. And to some extent, that's a smart move for them, because the money is down there, and plus, it's Miami, Florida. Not it's a much better place in November and December than state of Iowa. No disrespect to my state people, but come on, let's be honest here. So is that sort of a factor that you've heard come up in terms of what's going to be important to the Epenesas, or is it really just going to come down to fit?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question, because the Epinesa family has kept this very tight to the vest, this recruitment. When it comes down to the NIL and the money, I mean, that's kind of across the board now, right? If that's very, very important to the Epinesas, very important to Yose, I mean, some schools are going to shell out the cash to land a recruit like that. And though Iowa's football collective with the Swarm is better than the basketball, say, it's still not, top tier, right? Like a program like Miami might have. So that's a potential spot where the Hawkeyes could lose out on Yose. But I don't think I'm really sharing anything new there, right? Like that's just the state of college football now. And him being a one of the top recruits in the country, a top 3 pass rusher in the country, programs are going to shell out cash for a player like that. Like he is freaking good. I don't think people realize how good he is. Like put the huddle on. I think folks, for the most part, probably just make that connection of the Epenesas, right? Because AJ was phenomenal. Eric's currently a walk-on linebacker, but Yose is like a different level of explosion, a different level of playmaking, a different level of nasty, right?
I think a big part of that is, at the very least, reflected in what a great track performer he is too. I mean, the explosion and strength, just you use it however you can. So yeah, he is as surefire a prospect as I've seen in quite a while. Because how would these skills not translate as long as he's healthy? So I think Iowa's defensive coaches in particular have been salivating over this for a long time.
Yeah, you had a picture in the article, Elliot, of him. Well, all 3 brothers, him, Eric, and AJ, and it was striking how much he looked like AJ. Just physically, and he's what is he, like a 16-year-old or 17-year-old? Like,
So yeah, 17, 16, 17.
yeah, and he's that size, like he's that built already as a freaking 17-year-old. Like that, it's not even in a college weight room program, So like that's scary to think about the potential there, really. He didn't he had was he hurt last year? He didn't have a lot of stats.
I think it was either that. I'm pretty sure I remember hearing that he missed a chunk of last season with an injury, but at the same time, max preps isn't always super accurate. So
sure. Yep. Yeah, and the other thing, you mentioned that he's got a couple more visits lined up after Iowa, but kind of the other thing that came out in the article, and not to, you should read it because there's a lot of great detail in there, but it's a pretty wide open recruitment. So he's not necessarily done with official visits right after even these other 2 schools, potentially, if there's somebody else he really likes. So it seems like this recruitment could go on for a while, basically.
And I venture to guess the longer it goes on, the less likely it is that he ends up at Iowa, because there's going to be a lot of suitors, and somebody might get, I would probably the opposite of cold feet, warm feet, and shell out some money,
Yeah.
because they see the potential there, and Iowa is very, when they offer somebody, they are pretty. I wouldn't say stubborn. They're very much.
They're pretty intentional.
Sorry, intentional.
They're pretty, yeah,
very intentional, and they make it clear that offers are committable. So the more defensive linemen that they offer, the more they're thinking they got to go out and get somebody. So again, a lot more information in the article on iowa.rivals.com. If you want to join us today, you can do that, iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. We'd love to have you there and on our premium boards. You don't want to miss that. Lots of really good content previewing that upcoming visit this weekend. Of course, the big official visit weekend is June 21st through the 23rd. So that is definitely a time to hop on with us and join. Now, before we get out of here, players report Monday, I believe, for summer workouts, for football conditioning. I know the freshmen do. I'm assuming that means everybody else as well. Is there one player that I'm currently writing an article on this as well. It'll be premium, so I don't want to divulge all the players that I have on this list, but is there anybody that you guys think needs to have a big summer this year? Maybe one or two, probably we'll go one player per each of us, and then we'll get out of here and make it relatively quick. But who needs a big summer? Who needs to get in the weight room and maybe fill out or get maybe a little bit more explosive? Which player can use that the most and impact Iowa? And if neither of you are ready, I have 2 actually right off the top of my head. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, for me, it's Shonn Williams. That's a kid who is, obviously Iowa's backfield is pretty stacked, and Liddell Betts runs that backfield in a way that, there's never, or ideally they don't want like a number 1 and then a number 2 and then a number 3. They want 3 guys that they can rely on. But Caleb Johnson's in that backfield too, and he's sort of the opposite here, where he's already physically an absolute beast. And yet Le'Shawn was still working his way into that backfield, still productive in his own way. But if he's got this big summer in front of him, if he's got that conditioning up, if he's got that strength up, then all of a sudden he's leveling himself up. And all of a sudden, Caleb Johnson's, advantage physically, and, we're talking about 6'0", I think he's 221, and, just an absolute physical freak. If Le'Shawn gets himself closer to that and already has his, complement of, skills in the backfield, his own patience, his own way to, I'm going to tab him. Ross, how about you?
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. I think I'm going to go also on offense, Dayton Howard. I think we are the Iowa, the team and the fan base definitely is looking for somebody to step up at that outside X receiver position. I think there's definitely playing time up for grabs there, and Dayton Howard, has the physical tools, I think, to do well in that position. But he's got to prove it, and I think that's going to start, with what he can do, in the weight room and in the training camp this summer. Get that trust from Tim Lester and the quarterbacks and John Budmeyer, the wide receiver coach, and develop that trust, that relationship. And so hopefully he can turn that maybe into some more playing time and some more opportunities this fall. But that's a guy I think that, just because there isn't really an incumbent for that X position, so there's real opportunity there. And Iowa, that's a guy that looks like he has a chance at it. Adam?
I think you could say most of that about Seth Anderson too. That he's a kid who could really, really start to come into his own and prove that he was worthy of getting that Big Ten scholarship nod that he got, because expectations for him last season were sky high, and Kirk Ferentz mentioned a few times that probably the expectations were too high for somebody like him who hadn't really played a whole lot of college ball. This is his opportunity to really prove himself and to put a rough 2023 behind him, and especially in what's going to be a more functional offense this time too. So that's all I got.
I was going to throw one out that I think would surprise people, and I'm going to roll with it. I think Logan Jones could use it, coming off a year of pretty consistently being hurt. Those are the type of guys that you need to get in the weight room, because the more muscle you have, the less likely you are to get hurt. And he's already jacked, right? I think he has the squat record at Iowa, something crazy. But also Tyler Ellsbury is kind of nipping at his heels, right? Like after last season, Ellsbury played well, and there's only 5 spots on the offensive line, and they've got 7 guys with experience, plus those guys who are coming up in like Cade Piper, Cannon Leonard, etc., Trevor Lauk, those guys. So I think Logan Jones, as a guy who was seen to have a lot of promise and pretty much seen right away at the beginning of the year last year as Iowa's best offensive lineman, I'm not going to say he regressed, but because of those issues of injury, I don't think we got to see what he was really capable of last year. So get him in the weight room, get him healthy, get him back and moving, and I think that would be really beneficial for him.
Yeah, it's been a little while since we've heard those comparisons to Tyler Linderbaum that were starting to fly around when he first moved to center. Like, it would be great if he got back to that consistent production and started to earn those comparisons again.
And that'll do it. We'll wrap it up here. This episode of HawkCast. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's brought to you by iowa.rivals.com. If you are not subscribed there on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know, what player do you think could definitely use these summer the summer months for working out, getting a little bit bigger, getting a little bit stronger, and implementing that come camp and the season ahead. Don't forget to subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You may be listening but not subscribed, so make sure you do that today. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave that rate and review. Helps us out a lot, and it does make us very happy. Once again, folks, my name is Elliot Clough at Elliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Ross Binder and Adam Jacoby. For now, we will see you next time.